Always thrilled to be joined by our hockey insider, Pierre LeBrun. Pierre, the writing appeared to be on the wall Wednesday when we reported that Shanahan was given permission to talk to the New York Islanders. It was made official on Thursday. Are you, Pierre LeBrun, even remotely surprised by the news?
No, I don't know how anyone can be. And if for no other reason, 11 years is a long time to be running a pro sports franchise. And listen, Brendan Shanahan leaves the Leafs in a much better place than he left them. I know a lot of his detractors don't want to admit that, but I think they forget what the Leafs were like before he got there. But ultimately, he didn't achieve the most important goal, which was to get this team to either win a championship or at least to go deep. They didn't even come close to going deep. And that, for sure, if Brendan Shanahan was on air with us right now, Jay, he'd be the first one to point that out. So with this contract expiring, this was the expectation, not just within the Leafs organization, but throughout the NHL community, that this was likely going to happen. What could have saved Shanahan is probably, beating Florida and getting to the Eastern Conference Final. That might have been part of it. But at the end of the day, not surprising that he's moving on. Again, probably just as well for him as it is for the Leafs. 11 years is a long time, and sometimes you need a fresh start and a new challenge, and that's what Brendan Shanahan's looking for now.
Do you get the impression, Pierre, that he's excited about the idea of going to Long Island, or is it hard to say where his head is at about that job?
Yeah, hard to say. I mean, obviously all this is still fresh, even though it's not surprising. It's still fresh when it happens. I do expect that he will take the Islanders on as far as meeting with them and speaking with them, but where it goes from there is hard to say. I mean, what exactly would the Islanders have in mind for him? Because one of the interesting things right now, Jay, is that, as we know, the Islanders have been pretty far down the road on their GM search, which is, separate from what they would have in mind for Shanahan. But nonetheless, Mark Bergevin has had multiple interviews for the GM job. Matthew Darche has had multiple interviews for the GM job. Before all that, Ken Holland was talked about, met with the Islanders and ownership about the big job, about president of hockey and GM. And in the end, Ken Holland obviously felt the allure of the LA Kings job instead. The Islanders reached out wanting permission to speak with Jeff Gordon, who's the #1 in Montreal, and were denied that by owner Jeff Molson. So there's been a lot going on with the Islanders, and now suddenly they have an opportunity to speak with Brendan Shanahan. So we'll see how that can all fit. I mean, is it a job that appeals to Shanahan? And B, where would he be in terms of comfort with Bergevin and Darche and I'm sure others having gone far down the road with the Islanders in the GM search? One little PS to all that. Brendan Shanahan brought in Mark Bergevin for an interview 2 years ago for the job that ultimately went to Brad Treliving. So Shanahan and Bergevin had a formal interview, and by all accounts, I think it went pretty well. So whether that means anything with the possibilities out there with the Islanders management hires, we'll see.
So intriguing. And then, then there's the Leafs. And do you get the impression, Pierre, that they will hire a president to fill Shanahan's shoes? Or do you think it's maybe more likely that Brad Treliving just reports directly to our buddy Keith Pelley, the MLSC president?
Yeah, so I think for the interim, that's probably what we're going to see, is that it's the GM right to Keith Pelley. And then long term, I can't answer that either. I mean, Keith Pelley in his statement on Thursday talked about needing a new voice in his decision and the board's decision not to renew Brendan Shanahan. But what if he's that voice? I mean, is it written in stone that there has to be a go-between between the GM and Keith Pelley? There was no Keith Pelley when Brendan Shanahan was hired as president of the Leafs, right? So, it'll be interesting to hear from Keith Pelley on Friday as to what his thoughts are about whether or not he needs to replace Shanahan in that role. My guess is he's probably going to say over time, if he feels he finds the right candidate, that could happen, but that they're not going to rush into it. In the interim, I think he's comfortable just having a direct relationship with the GM. I should also point this out, Jay. Yes, Brad Treliving's job status is unchanged. That doesn't mean that his life is unchanged. We haven't heard from Brad Treliving since the end of the season, but just going on past experience when GMs lose their boss that hired them, it's an unsettling feeling. I mean, Brendan Shanahan and Brad Treliving had a really good relationship. They only worked together 2 years, but by all accounts had great chemistry. So, yeah, I'm sure, obviously Brad Treliving probably happy he wasn't fired today. but probably still wondering what's my future with the Leafs right now. That would be a natural emotion, I think, when you lose the person who brought you in.
Pierre, we all have our assumptions about how this Leaf offseason will play out, right? Most people probably think Mitch Marner is going to leave. Most people probably think John Tavares is going to stay because he said he wants to stay. Did the news on Thursday about Shanahan change any of your assumptions about how this offseason might play out?
I mean, I don't think so for the most part, because I think those were always going to be Brad Treliving-led discussions and decisions. Obviously, Brendan Shanahan was a big part of that, again, because of his relationship with Treliving. But Treliving's still in place. He's already done a lot of homework on where he feels those files are. So I don't know that it changes much unless before the end of the summer a new president is in fact hired and that person wants to do something drastically different. But I don't see the timing working. I don't see a new president in place, by the start of this offseason here. So this is all up to Brad Treliving in my mind. And listen, I think the writing's on the wall when it comes to Mitch Marner. As you said, everything we're hearing seems to be leading to him probably going to market, very probably going to market, whereas John Tavares was very blunt about it the other day. Again, he wants to stay. Now, he 100% wants to stay. It's not 100% that he's going to stay, because that depends on the number. And, he had a really strong season, a regular season for sure, which, probably on the market would net him $6 to $7 million on a short-term deal a year. But I don't know if that's a number that works as a discount for him to stay in Toronto. So that remains to be seen.
Pierre, next time I get to chat with you, it will be about actual hockey. You will be in Edmonton for games 3 and 4 of the Western Conference Final. So you'll be hanging out with Ryan Rishaug. I can only imagine what kind of trouble you two will get into in the Cook County Saloon, but that's for another time. Travel safe, my friend, and have a terrific weekend, okay?
Right on, right on. Thanks, Jay.